Hey everyone. You know, when I've heard people like Andre Meadows and Screen Junkies and AfterBuzz.tv and many others here on YouTube and on the internet, social media abroad, when they tell me that when they tell people like me that Riverdale is one of the best series to come out in a while, and that it has done a great job in taking these sunny, wholesome, pure as light characters and putting them into it, and thus did something that was almost seemingly impossible, and that's take them and put them in this gritty, darker environment, you know, and thus make something of it that people are talking about every week. I have to agree that they did a decent job. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that, if Riverdale is, no, I'm not gonna sit here and still excuse the fact that Riverdale may be the reason that the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books by Archie Comics, that the Mega Man comics, and then any other licensed comic titles that they have, and some of the original titles are delayed by Riverdale, being delayed because of Riverdale. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not the reason, because honestly, there's a part of me that thinks it is. I think Riverdale could be a major part. And I believe, maybe in my opinion, I should say, I believe in my opinion, my own opinion, that if we get any news, positive or whatever, it'll be within the next few weeks after the finale is done and the show ends up officially, the first season that is, shows up officially onto Netflix a week after here in the U.S. And thus you kind of get a bit of a break. And thus you get kind of a bit of a break from the Riverdale thing, and that, I think, with that break will help Archie Comics focus more on the other properties that they've ignored or put on the shelf. Because, like I said before, I think when Riverdale came out, a lot of the comics and stuff became less of a priority, and Riverdale became the main priority. And I think, if anything, like I said, if we get any information, it'll be within the next week or two. And the reason I say the Riverdale could be at fault here is, you look at the Sonic the Hedgehog free comic book day issue that was supposed to come out, it was replaced by Riverdale. You take a look at, I think, where the Sonic Digest was supposed to come out this month at stores, and it's replaced by Riverdale. You take a look at any other titles, and they've been replaced by Riverdale related or Archie related titles that connect with Riverdale. So in my opinion, I think honestly, we may end up getting an answer very soon. Hopefully it's a positive answer, and hopefully after this Archie Comics can straighten out the priorities and be like, yeah, we got to focus on the next season of Riverdale, but let's also try to focus on these comics that we ignored because we were told to focus on Riverdale. Hopefully they work something out, if that's the case. But besides that, I have to say Riverdale is, definitely lives up to the hype that it was given. It lives up to the hype. It definitely, like I said, it definitely lives up to the hype here, to the point that this one episode, even if you've not watched the entire season, and you should, the rest of the, if you've not watched the rest of the season, go on demand right now, or go on Netflix, wherever you are living in the world, and watch the rest of the season. And watch the first 11 episodes leading up to this one, because there's a lot of things that get answered finally in this episode. They get answered finally in this episode. And a lot of plot points kind of get tied up a little bit. But along with the tie-ups, you also get some new mysteries arising as well. For example, right off the bat, we leave off basically where the last episode ended, and they basically say, hey, look, we got to go tell our parents about this. You know, our parents have some connections. And, you know, Archie's like, hey, let's talk to my dad. Let's talk to our parents, let them know what we found out. And, of course, the parents are not too happy about the kids investigating this. And Alice, of course, is still, you know, sticks to her guns, like saying, hey, look, you know, what is there to investigate? We know who killed Jason now. We know who the killer is. And, you know, again, the parents are like, look, you just got to stay out of this. But, of course, you know Archie, Betty, and Veronica, they don't listen or anything. Even though the parents, like Fred, he's pleading with his son, look, I care about what happens to you. Don't let this happen. And such. You know, and everybody's like, just don't do this. Hermione doesn't want her daughter to do it. They don't want, you know, Alice doesn't want her daughter involved in this. But Betty's the one that points out, Mom, you're the one that had asked Veronica to go snoop in FP's place. And of course Veronica counters that by saying, well, actually I went to her as well and she suggested it. So, yeah, you know, things don't turn out so well at first. And of course one of the other things a lot of people are worried about is Jughead, where his whereabouts are. Where is he? And we find out that Jughead is purchased a bus ticket to Toledo, to visit his mom and his sister, maybe stay with them for a while. And he calls his mom on the phone, telling her what he's going to be doing. And we don't hear his mom's voice, but it sounds like she says something to him that upsets him. It upsets him, is what it does. It upsets him to a point that, you know, he breaks down in there and he starts crying. You know, he starts crying. It's like he breaks down in the phone booth and he starts crying because his mom obviously tells him something. When he says, hey, I want to go see you and Jellybean, spend time with you guys, she says something to him. I think when he mentions Jellybean's name, and it's like it's like whatever his mom said kind of upset him. It's like, did something happen to Jellybean in Toledo? Did she die? What's going on? We don't know. So, yeah. Jughead gets upset by something his mom says, and again, we don't know what it is. And he just tells his mom, hey, just forget I called and mentioned it, and hangs up, and then tries to get his ticket changed to somewhere a little further, the furthest being Central Florida. But Jughead's plans to probably stay at the bus terminal don't work out because the lady's like, look, we close up in about 15 minutes, which is about midnight, and we open up at 5. So basically because Jughead, he's looking around at the benches and everything thinking, maybe I can stay here, but it's almost like the terminal lady is like, hey, you can come back at 5 in the morning. It's like she can tell he's trying to think of staying there, and that ain't going to happen. So where do Archie and Betty and eventually Veronica find Jughead? At Pop's, of course, because Veronica calls them, and she tells Archie and Betty what's going on. Basically, that her life, along with her mom's, is kind of going down this downward spiral. Because what happens is Veronica notices her mom's looking for some passports. She's looking for some passports to leave, obviously, the country. And Veronica, she's not too happy about this. She basically, you know, calls her mom out on it and saying, this is just like what you did in New York. You know, what is going on here? And Hermione's like, and to Hermione's defense, she's basically saying, look, I don't want to leave. In Hermione's defense, she's like, look, I don't want to leave, but just in case there's a possibility that FP killed, that she's just saying that basically she says, if there's a possibility that your father hired FP to kill Jason, you know, we got to be ready to leave because it's going to come back on us. So she just says, she just tells Veronica that just in case, pack a bag, be ready to hit the road. And of course, Veronica, like I said, she calls up her friends, tells them what's happening, basically, and wants to talk. They tell her what they're doing, and she's the one that mentions to them, well, what place would Jughead go to, or what place around here is open 24/7 that Jughead would go to? And of course, they go to Pop's. They find Jughead there. They explain what they have found out. They go to Sheriff Eller, who, at this same time, is basically briefing FP Forsyth. They're basically briefing him, or interrogating him, questioning him, asking what's going on. FP comes up with a story, basically of how, he made some kind of connection with Jason about, doing a job for him, involving the drugs and stuff, and, like I said, involving the drugs and everything. But then he comes up with he makes up a part of the story, because we find out this is not entirely true. He makes up a part of the story where he thinks there's something else going on here with Jason, feels that there's alternative motives, and that Jason mentioned to Forsyth, or to FP, that he was going to go run away with his pregnant girlfriend. So FP makes up the story that he followed Jason, caught up to Jason, captured him, tortured him, and then killed him. Even though we don't see FP mentioning or confessing to Sheriff Keller. When Sheriff Keller asks him, well, did you do it? Did you kill him? We don't see the confession. But obviously he confessed. Because Keller tells Archie and Veronica and them, well, Archie, Veronica, and Betty, basically the foursome, if you will, Archie, Jughead, Betty, and Veronica, he tells them, okay, well, if what you're telling me is true, then why did he just confess to it? So, yeah, things are not looking good for Jughead's family, but on top of that, look at his family. So, on top of that, Jughead overhears, I don't know if this... So, again, on top of that, we see them back at school. Jughead's not there, isn't there at first, and the paper is out, and then the Riverdale paper comes out saying justice for Jason, and the Blossoms see this, and they're like, hey, look, good news. And they show Polly, they show Cheryl, and it's like, you could tell Polly and Cheryl kind of like looking at each other at the dinner table, at the breakfast table, I guess you can say, and they're like, to them it's like, he's the one that did it, FP? Because even though he's a Southside Serpent, you can kind of tell that Polly's looking at that and thinking, what would his motive be? Why would he do it? It doesn't make sense. So even Polly's realizing, and even Cheryl, I think, is realizing this too. Why would he do this? Now, of course, Cheryl believes it at first, but you can even tell that she is kind of like on the fence about it. Like she believes it at first, but there's a part of her that doesn't believe it, and basically, again, Polly has this complex look on her face, like, she doesn't want to believe it's true, but then she's looking at Cheryl, and you can tell, like, say, Cheryl's on the fence about it, because when Jughead does arrive at the school during, it looks like lunch hour or a break, he walks in, everybody sees him walking in and going towards Cheryl, and basically their immediate response is, oh crap, blank's going to go down. And he goes up to Cheryl, and basically he apologizes to her. Jughead just apologizes to Cheryl for what happened, because even Jughead at this point is believing it's true. And Cheryl, she just gets up and slaps him right in the face, beats on him a little bit on the chest. And of course, Mr. Weatherby, the principal, comes out, calls for Jughead to come to the office with him. And Archie and his friends are like, hey, look, he didn't do nothing. But still, it's like, Weatherby's not looking at it. And Weatherby basically makes the suggestion that Jughead would be better off serving the rest of the semester, or finishing off the semester at home, basically being homeschooled, instead of being at the school due to the situation. And of course this leads, and how do we find this out? Well, we find this out because the principal calls up Fred Andrews, who's letting Jughead stay with them, and Archie comes in as soon as the conversation on the phone conversation is over, and basically finds out what's going on. They have a bit of not a scuffle, but an argument. Uh, and Fred just basically says that, something about, the Jones always has like trouble, always follows the Jones everywhere. Of course, Jughead, he's walking down the stairs and he overhears this. He's upset about what he's hearing, and then he decides to get up, go out, and go sleep in the garage for the night. He tells because after the argument, Archie sees him going out the door, and he says, and Jughead's like, "Look, I'm just gonna sleep in the garage tonight, okay?" Like, he doesn't want nothing to do with this. And yeah, it's not good. But then here's a more intriguing point. We get into, so basically at the same time during the middle of the night, Alice and Betty overhear somebody downstairs, looking through the stuff. Basically, they hear someone downstairs, in the house. So they go downstairs. Betty is surprised to see her mom has the gun. I think Miss Grundy's gun or something. Well, not Miss Grundy's gun, but has a gun on her. She's wondering, what the heck do you have that for? And Alice is like, hey, don't worry about it. Just get behind me. Get ready to call 911 just in case. So they go downstairs. She tells the person that's down there to put their hands up and turn around and don't move. And it turns out to be her husband, Hal, Betty's dad, which kind of surprises them a little bit. And then we find out why he was down there. And this is where some of the connections come in, because basically Hal reveals that it was not Forsythe or FP that broke into Sheriff Keller's house and stole the murder, basically ripped up the murder wall and all that. No, it was him. Why? Why would he do this? And even Alice wants to know, well, why would you do this? Why do you have this in the first place? Both Betty and her are wondering this, and he says he basically wants to destroy the evidence, the photographic evidence, because it could lead back to not just him, but it could lead back to Polly, and thus to them, to the Coopers, and the connection with the Blossoms. Awesomes. And then this is one of the biggest reveals of the night in the show. We find out that the reason he wants to do this is because, like I said, he's afraid Sheriff Keller's going to find a connection between. Well, basically, long story. Basically, the point I'm trying to get at is how the reason how Betty's dad wants to destroy the photographic evidence is because it not only would lead them back to him, probably lead them mostly to Polly, but Sheriff Keller, obviously being smarter than he looks, would be able, in his eyes, in Hal's mind, well, not in Hal's eyes, but in Hal's mind, would put two and two together and then find a long connection and basically piece together some kind of connection between both the Blossoms and the Coopers. And the reason he's afraid that the sheriff might find some kind of connection, connecting, or some kind of evidence that would connect the Blossoms to the Coopers is due to one reason. We find out that Betty's great-grandpa Cooper was murdered by a Blossom. But here's what's interesting about this, and again, this is where the big reveal comes in. One of the big reveals is he wasn't killed by a Blossom. We basically find out that Betty's great-grandpa wasn't just killed by a Blossom, but her great-grandpa was a Blossom. Yeah, her great-grandpa was a Blossom, and holy moly, I mean, you talk about big twists and reveals. Basically, we find out right here that Betty and Cheryl are relatives. They are cousins to a sense, and this really takes Betty and Alice back. Really takes them